In terms of raw, destructive potential, Darth Nihilus was one of the most powerful Sith Lords of all time. A walking wound in the Force, Nihilus fed off the life forces of other beings, consuming entire planets to sate his hunger. Few could even withstand being in the same room with him for long. Fewer still had the strength to confront him. In the end, it took Meetra Surik, a Jedi exile who had been cut off from the Force, to bring Nihilus down. But was there an easier way to bring down the Lord of Hunger? All who felt the Force were vulnerable to Nihilus's powers, but what about droids? Would a droid army have been able to stop him?
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
First things first, if you're interested in how Darth Nihilus came to be and what enabled the Jedi Exile to defeat him, we have a whole video dedicated to him that we recommend you check out. Otherwise, here's a quick recap. Darth Nihilus wasn't your usual Sith Lord. It was said that he was less of a man and more of an entity, a force of nature, a malevolent hunger that sought to consume all life in the universe. He was involved in the Battle of Malachor V, which ended with an atrocity that created a terrible wound in the Force. Nihilus became an extension of that wound. After the battle, he was cursed with a terrible hunger that led him to consume the life forces of Force-sensitive beings, increasing his own power in the process. The more he fed, the more powerful he became, and the more difficult it was to satisfy his hunger. This pattern continued to the point where Nihilus had to consume entire planets just to sustain himself. He had little choice in the matter. If he didn't feed, the hunger would consume him instead. Nihilus's ability to drain living beings, especially on such a massive scale, was his primary power, but he did have others. Nihilus was proficient in telekinesis, force lightning, and other common offensive force powers, and he carried a lightsaber. However, he rarely used any of these, as he rarely left the bridge of his ship. This is because of a factor that is crucial to understanding our scenario here, which is that Nihilus perceived the universe on a very large scale, with little to no awareness of individuals. It wasn't just that he didn't care about individuals, they were far, far beneath his notice. When he looked at the world around him, Nihilus saw planets and stars. Anything else was too small to demand his attention. Individual beings were like dust mites to him, but just because Nihilus didn't pay any attention to individuals didn't mean they couldn't threaten him. Meetra Surik, Visas Ma, and Mandalore the Preserver were able to gang up on the Lord of Hunger and kill him after all, so couldn't a battalion of droids easily have done the same? Perhaps, but even if they set out to try, they would have had trouble just getting to Nihilus in the first place. Darth Nihilus didn't travel anywhere alone. He had an army, and anyone looking to kill him would have to beat back his troops first. It's unknown exactly how large his fleet was, but it contained at least 5 vessels, 1 Centurion-class battlecruiser, and 4 Interdictor-class cruisers. The Interdictors were all former ships of Darth Revan's Sith Armada, which joined Nihilus after the collapse of the Sith Empire, while the battlecruiser was a ghost ship called the Ravager. Each carried an entire army of Sith troopers. Even if we assume that the 4 Interdictor-class cruisers we know about were the only supporting vessels in Nihilus's fleet, they alone would be a challenge for anyone looking to take out the Lord of Hunger. Interdictors were tough ships, capable of ripping enemy craft out of hyperspace and leading planetary-scale orbital bombardment operations. Each had a maximum capacity of 48 Sith fighters and 3,600 troopers, meaning Nihilus's Interdictors could have come with some 15,000 men and 200 fighters. That's a hell of a defensive screen. Then there was the Ravager, Nihilus's flagship. The Ravager was a ghost ship. It was present for the Battle of Malachor V and was crushed into the planet's surface near the end of the battle. Nihilus tore the wrecked ship from Malachor's gravity well and claimed it as his flagship, holding the vessel together through sheer force of will. The Ravager was in absolutely terrible shape and wouldn't even have been space-worthy without Nihilus. There were massive chunks missing from the hull, leaving only a thin particle shield between many sections of the ship and the vacuum of space. It's unknown how much the vessel's damage reduced its offensive capabilities or capacity to carry fighter craft or troops. However, Stock Centurion-class battlecruisers carried 96 Sith fighters and 7,400 Sith troopers. The men aboard the Ravager were different from those who crewed Nihilus's other ships. Nihilus slowly drained the life forces of all living beings aboard the Ravager, slowly turning them into puppets, zombie-like slaves bound to his will. The men who served on the Ravager's bridge were the most striking examples of this. They even looked the part of zombies and seemed to have little to no capacity for independent thought. While the slaves Nihilus kept aboard the Ravager wouldn't have been all that skilled in combat, Nihilus likely would have been able to push them far beyond the limits of any ordinary living being, forcing them to fight in his defense until they were torn to pieces. So, in summary, Darth Nihilus had 1 Centurion-class battlecruiser, 4 Interdictor-class battlecruisers, 288 Sith fighters, and 21,800 Sith troopers guarding him. A smaller force of battle droids would have been crushed before it even had the chance to face Nihilus, but it's still possible that a larger droid force would have been able to tear through all of Nihilus's defenses and confront the Lord of Hunger. On paper, it looks like a droid army might have stood a chance against Darth Nihilus. The droids wouldn't have been affected by Nihilus's life-draining ability, and while Nihilus could have fought off a good many droids with his lightsaber and other force powers, you can only really defend yourself against so many battle droids at a time. If Nihilus were a normal Sith Lord with the ability to eat planets, then yes, a droid army would have been able to kill him. Here's the thing though, Nihilus wasn't a normal Sith Lord. Kreia, who taught Darth Nihilus for a time, once remarked that he was already dead. What was in question, rather, was how many he could take with him before he succumbed. He was an entity, a creature of intent, a tendril of a greater, darker power tied to a physical form. This leads back into something we mentioned earlier, that Nihilus was an extension of Malachor 5. Once, the Lord of Hunger might have been a man, but by the time he started consuming planets, he had become something else. Sure, he had a physical body under his robes and all, but it was really just a shell, a vessel for a terrible, planet-consuming hunger. That hunger didn't come from Nihilus himself, it was part of the force wound of Malachor 5, which Nihilus carried with him. When we talk about Darth Nihilus, we're really talking about that wound in the Force because that was all he really was. Earlier, we mentioned that Nihilus was killed by a Jedi exile named Meetra Surik. She was able to accomplish this because of one important factor. She, like Nihilus, carried part of the wound of Malachor 5 within her. Because of this, Nihilus was unable to drain her life force and unable to withstand her in battle. More importantly, however, it allowed Surik to close the wound in the Force that Nihilus embodied. It wasn't enough that she and her allies destroyed Nihilus's body because Nihilus himself was never the real threat. The real threat was the wound in the Force, which Meetra Surik alone could heal. If battle droids tried to kill Darth Nihilus, they might have succeeded at destroying his body, but that wouldn't have done much good. The wound in the Force, the all-consuming hunger, would have endured. It would have found a new vessel and continued consuming worlds one way or another. Droids were good for many things, but healing wounds in the Force was a bit beyond their pay grade. It was a solid idea, but ultimately a droid army wouldn't have been any more effective at stopping Darth Nihilus than an army of organics. But what do you think? Would you like to see more videos about Darth Nihilus in the future? Free to post your thoughts in the comment section below. As always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.